In the quiet of his small study, the microscope's lens had framed an unexpected landscape. The burr's surface appeared bristling with curved hooks, each one reaching into the tangled loops of wool fibers he had placed beside it. As he adjusted the focus, the hooks tightened their grip, refusing to let go. The stubbornness that had annoyed him on the path now revealed itself as a precise, repeatable mechanism. He laid Milka's shed hairs under the lens next, collected from the mat he had used to brush the dog after the hunt. The same hooks latched into the fine strands, catching and holding with effortless persistence. On the table around him, the day's gear lay scattered, the hunting jacket, the woolen socks, a small pile of burrs. Every surface told the same story of clinging and resistance, driven by the same microscopic structure. On a sheet of paper beside the microscope, he sketched what he had seen. Tiny hooks on one side, loops on the other, meeting in a reversible embrace. He noted how they separated cleanly when pulled apart, yet reattached as soon as they met again. The design in nature suggested a manufactured twin, one side mimicking the burr, the other imitating the loops of fabric and fur that had caught them in the fields. Snow-covered roofs and narrow streets framed the lakeside town of Nyon, where a boy dismantled clocks and toy trains on a kitchen table. He had drawn pulleys and gears in the margins of school notebooks and sketched a small crane that could hoist pebbles like freight. Adults around him prized punctuality and fine workmanship, and every broken hinge or stiff latch in the house became another puzzle to be taken apart and rebuilt. Years later, lecture halls at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne filled his days with equations and circuit diagrams. Electrical machines hummed in laboratories that smelled faintly of solder and oil. Professors demonstrated generators and transformers, but his attention also lingered on the neatness of coils, the precise fit of contacts, the way metal parts met and separated. In libraries, he studied patent drawings that reduced complex devices to clear, functional lines. Work as a patent engineer at a Swiss machine works immersed him in a culture of tolerances measured in microns. Files and blueprints crossed his desk, each demanding a careful reading of how cogs, springs, and levers behaved under stress. Outside the factory, he walked the Jura Mountains with a small satchel, slipping unusual seed pods, patterned leaves, and iridescent beetles into envelopes. At home, these finds shared space with technical diagrams on a crowded workbench. The microscope's light had cut through the fuzzy outline of the burdock burr and revealed an ordered architecture. Each bristling spine ended in a tiny curved hook, angled like a question mark and springy under the slightest pressure. When a strand of dog hair slid across the slide, it caught and held, then released with a soft snap when pulled away. Wool and cotton fibers behaved the same, surrendering reluctantly but without tearing. Botanists described how this intricate system had not been designed for clothing at all, but for survival. Burdock plants depended on passing animals to transport their seeds away from crowded ground. The hooks gripped fur and feathers, riding for kilometers before drying stems broke or grooming hands plucked them free. Each detached burr dropped its seeds onto new soil, turning irritation in a pelt into a dispersal strategy written into the plant's evolution. On the workbench, sheets of paper lay scattered beside the microscope, filled with rough pencil lines. The hooks appeared again and again, diagrammed from different angles, paired now not with fur, but with imagined loops of thread. Arrows indicated movement, press together, pull apart, repeat. The sketches captured a simple equation between hook and loop, translating the burr's quiet efficiency into the concept of a man-made fastening system that could be opened and closed indefinitely. In a small workshop, rolls of cotton cloth lay stacked beside jars of broken burrs that still carried fragments of fur. The engineer sketched tightly spaced threads, then fed cotton through a loom, aiming to mimic the dense softness of an animal's coat. Under his tools, the woven surface was scuffed and brushed, but the fibres only fuzzed and tore. When he pressed test patches together, the makeshift loops slid apart with a faint, disappointing whisper. He leaned over a magnifying lens, moving a burr beside the frayed cotton. The burr's hooks, rigid and curved, held fast to each stray hair caught in their grasp. On the fabric, however, his loops split open or vanished into lint. Patent sketches recorded each change in thread thickness, each new weaving pattern. Trial squares, pinned to labelled boards, showed the same story: inconsistent grip, broken fibres, a stubborn refusal to behave like the specimen from the field. In weaving mills across Switzerland, the idea met puzzled faces. Technicians listened as he described a cloth that should fasten simply by being pressed together, then pulled apart without glue or buttons. They ran fingers over his samples, feeling only rough cotton and loose threads. Some suggested stronger finishes, others thicker yarn, but none believed the concept could be reproduced reliably. The gulf between the burr's effortless hold and industrial practice remained wide and unresolved. In a modest Swiss workshop, spools of yarn turned while metal clattered and the air smelled faintly of oil and scorched fibre. A lone figure bent over a loom, watching cotton threads snap under stress, then fray beyond use. Mocking remarks from colleagues echoed in the back of his mind, but the experiments continued. He paid machinists from his own pocket, asking for impossible tolerances as they tried to cut and raise loops with crude temperamental devices. Attention shifted to nylon, a new synthetic fibre first developed by chemists at DuPont before the war. Under the lamps, its threads shone harder and smoother than cotton. Test strips bent and straightened again and again, surviving where natural fibres failed. He learned that when nylon was heated, it kept the shape it cooled into. This property suggested a route toward durable loops, if only the machines could be coaxed into forming them with consistent precision. Gradually, a method emerged from endless adjustments. Woven nylon fabric passed beneath carefully aligned blades, which sliced only partway through the raised loops. Heat sealed the cut ends, and some loops twisted into tiny, stiff hooks. Under magnification, the surface looked like a miniature forest of curved stems. Matching it against the uncut looped fabric, he pressed them together, then pulled. The connection held, released, and held again, revealing the stubborn practicality of the once ridiculed idea. By the early 1950s, the fastener existed not just on the workbench, but in legal language and engineering drawings. Patent pages lay open, crowded with cross-sections of woven strips, arrays of tiny hooks sketched with meticulous precision. In the descriptions, one tape bore resilient hooks, the other dense loops, both formed from synthetic fibres. Each claim defined dimensions, materials, and weaving patterns, fixing in law what burrs and dog fur had once demonstrated in the forest. A decision then fixed the identity of the new fastener. The engineer combined the softness of velours with the grasp of crochet, forming the word Velcro. In 1951, he filed for protection in Switzerland, and patent offices slowly transformed his observations into numbered rights. In 1952, he established Velcro SA, a company whose paperwork, stamped and dated, marked the moment when a personal curiosity turned into a formal enterprise with capital, staff, and obligations. Inside textile mills in France, rows of specialized looms clattered as technicians experimented with nylon thread. Metal hooks lifted and roughed the fibers, then blades sliced them into open hooks fine enough to catch loops without tearing them. Adjustments to tension, temperature, and cutting depth filled logbooks. Each trial edged closer to a consistent, repeatable fabric that recreated the grip of burrs, only now measured, standardized, and ready for industrial use. The new fastening system entered showrooms and sewing workshops with a quiet skepticism hanging over it. Tailors ran their fingers over the hooked strips and looped fabric, then shook their heads at the scratchy sound it made when pulled apart. Fashion designers examined sample garments, frowning at the flat, utilitarian bands that replaced gleaming zippers and carefully placed buttons. They judged it inelegant, too mechanical, and unsuited to the subtle lines and textures they preferred. While bolts of the material sat largely ignored in clothing studios, a different kind of engineer studied it with practical curiosity. In the United States, the early years of human spaceflight raised simple but stubborn questions about daily tasks in weightlessness. Tools, checklists, pens, and small devices drifted whenever they were released. NASA teams searched for ways to anchor objects quickly and reliably to the walls and consoles of cramped spacecraft cabins. Within this environment, the hooked and looped fabric found a new purpose. NASA engineers attached patches to instruments, control panels, and the sleeves of pressure suits. Archival images from Gemini and Apollo missions later revealed swatches of the material holding cue cards, biomedical sensors, and small tools in place while astronauts floated. Official mission reports described its routine use, noting how it prevented items from escaping in zero gravity and simplified countless minor tasks in orbit. By the late 1960s, racks of bright ski jackets and padded mountaineering suits already carried the quiet signature of hook and loop tape. On exposed slopes, thick gloves and numb fingers no longer wrestled with frozen buttons or stubborn zippers. Straps sealed cuffs against blowing powder, cinched gaiters over boots, and secured goggles and helmets. Climbers pulled at flaps and tabs that opened and closed with a simple tug, even in biting wind and swirling snow. In hospitals and clinics, rolls of the new fastener lay beside bandages and instruments. Nurses wrapped blood pressure cuffs that held firm yet loosened instantly. Orthopedic teams built braces with adjustable straps that adapted to swelling and rehabilitation needs. Emergency crews fixed limbs in temporary splints that could be readjusted on the way to the hospital. Surfaces wiped clean with disinfectant, and worn straps were replaced without discarding expensive equipment. Shoe companies began offering children's sneakers with broad, simple straps. Puma models appeared first, followed by experiments from brands such as Nike, trading knots for quick pulls. At the same time, camera bags closed with soft ripping sounds, cable bundles stayed ordered along studio floors, and airline seat covers came off for rapid cleaning. Military webbing, pouches, and insignia used patches that could be repositioned in seconds, embedding the fastener into everyday operations. The burrs that once clung stubbornly to a dog's coat reappeared in laboratories, studios, and classrooms as a kind of shorthand for a new way of thinking. Engineers pointed to the tiny hooks under the microscope and described a precise, repeatable process. Observe a natural structure, test how it behaved, then translate that behavior into a manufactured system. Velcro, once a curiosity, became a clear demonstration that close attention to biology could yield robust mechanical solutions. In Japan, railway engineers faced the problem of sonic booms as high-speed trains burst from tunnels. Ornithologists showed how a kingfisher's beak pierced water with minimal splash. The elongated, tapered nose that emerged on the Shinkansen echoed that beak's profile, reducing noise and energy use. The same logic that had turned burrs into fasteners now guided aerodynamic design. take a proven natural form and adapt its geometry to solve a specific performance constraint. Materials scientists studying shark skin examined its microscopic ribbed texture, known as dermal denticles, and reproduced its drag-reducing pattern on swimsuits, aircraft coatings, and ship hull films. Technical papers described these surfaces as biomimetic, linking them explicitly to earlier hook-and-loop fasteners. Design schools assigned case studies on Velcro alongside kingfisher-inspired trains and sharkskin surfaces, treating them as variations on a single method. Distill how living systems worked, then encode those principles into engineered form. In the late years of his life, George de Mestral stood as a decorated engineer, recognized by distinctions such as the French Ordre du Mérite and honors from Swiss technical societies. He lived quietly in Comony, not far from the paths where the first burrs had once clung to his dog Milka's fur. When he died there in 1990, the hook-and-loop system he had conceived no longer belonged to a single patent portfolio but to a global industry. By then, manufacturers on several continents produced hook-and-loop fasteners in countless forms. Some carried the original Velcro name under license. Others appeared as unbranded strips woven into shoes, jackets, cable ties, and industrial gear. Engineers adapted the basic principle to specialized uses: low-noise closures for military uniforms and pouches, miniature arrays anchoring medical implants, and high-performance variants tailored for aircraft, clean rooms, and chemically aggressive environments. Corporate archives and court filings recorded how the Velcro trademark was defended against becoming a generic word, even as everyday speech used it for almost any hook-and-loop strip. In laboratories, microscopes revealed ever more refined hooks and loops, while on forest paths, burrs still latched onto passing animals. A dog's coat gathered seeds along a trail, repeating the simple interaction that had once guided an attentive walker toward an invention used by billions of hands.